Hello, Internet. I thought I would talk about the recent update to Poppy Seed Pets. I was about to say SciPets. Things like this don't help. You see that? I still call it SciPets in some places. But about the huge relationship update, afterwards, I just hadn't done one of the coding videos in so long. It didn't even occur to me. It's like to record me coding that system, which I think would have been interesting to people. It's a very large and bizarre and complex system. In some ways larger than it needs to be, which I'll talk about. But yeah, I mean, right, it's interesting. It's a big update. Surely people would be interested to know how this thing works. So I thought I'll certainly get into the code here, and most of it is on, which one is this? Is the front end. Here's the back end. So yeah, here's already some relationship code. So I'll go over some of this. But first, I just thought I'd talk about why I even made this change. So the thing I was using before is the triangular theory of love. I've talked about this before because it was in the game, and I don't know much about the history of it. I couldn't have told you that it was developed by a Robert Sternberg, but what I do remember is this wonderful triangle. And this is what was being used on Poppy Seed Pets, and I knew about it because I found it when I was implementing relationships on SciPets, so I just was like, yeah, I'll use that, it's good. And what this thing is in a nutshell is it says this theory says you can describe all relationships as being values on three different axes. Really, you could put this in 3D space or whatever, but triangles are probably a little more, presentable or easy to draw, certainly. So, you could imagine, and intimacy is easy to confuse with like physicalness, but that's what passion is about here. So, if you were like, oh, a relationship of just all intimacy and no passion, and some commitment, you might say, oh, that's like a friend, a good friend. You hang out when you hang out, and oh, maybe be sad if they left or something. It's like, I don't know, maybe an acquaintance that you really get along with or something, right? And then it was also, or like a familial relationship, maybe has high commitment depending on intimacy, depending on how you get along with your family, hopefully well, but low on passion, we hope, yeah, right. But also you can describe other kinds of relationships with this, which I hadn't thought about, and one of them and there's a cat here now meowing and rubbing against me. She gets excited when I talk because then that's, I don't know, I'm making human noises. So one example he gave, which I thought was interesting, was that of an arranged marriage where, you feel this social pressure, this commitment. It's like, oh my God, this is important for my family and all these things, right? High commitment, but you don't even know the person yet. You don't like them. You're not necessarily physically attracted, and that would be that would be an example there. Or another thing he talked, let's go back to Poppy Seed Pets because we don't have arranged marriages in Poppy Seed Pets. Don't know if that's of interest. I'm not super keen on coding that up or anything, but I guess if everyone in the world was like, those are important to us, whatever. I don't think that's the case though. So, but something we do have, right, is friends with benefits types relationships. And you might say, oh, that's where you have a high passion, and maybe some amount of commitment and or intimacy, but it's really passion leaning, right? So that sounds great. It's like, whoa, we can describe all these different relationships with this triangle. Amazing! What a great system! What a great theory! How useful! How applicable! The problem I was having with Poppy Seed Pets is it doesn't really give, so unlike Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which let's go ahead and pull that guy up too. Of course, that's going to happen. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It'll come up. This model gives pets direction that like decision points that they can make, whereas the other one is interesting that they're both triangles. I didn't really think about that, but so let's just look at this thing, right? So Maslow's hierarchy says, whoa, you have needs of the body. Now, since we were talking about passion, that was part of what he said too, but he was also talking about you need food and water and to not be physically wounded, right? Although that might be safety. No, I think that would be a physical need. So, but anyway, so Maslow was like, if those things aren't met, and he did include sex in there as well, which, he was around the time of Freud, so everyone's going nuts about that. He's like, if you don't have those needs met, you won't care about anything else. You won't care about safety. You won't care about having friends. You won't care about your self-esteem. You certainly won't care about improving yourself. You need to eat food, right? Or you need to get laid, apparently, is more important than safety. I don't know if that's true, but whatever. And there's other weird contradictions you can find in here. Like, people will totally do things, out of order, you might say, because, you might have a great commitment to some particular person. Maybe you would, put yourself in harm's way for someone that you like or something like that, right? So humans do things that are contrary to this triangle, but this triangle is, I mean, comes from, looking at animals, but also kind of just the general basic behavior of humans. So it's a pretty good model, and it certainly works for poppy seed pets and side pets. And so that's the thing. So again, this gives direction for the pets. It's like, oh, what will the pet do right now? Well, it doesn't have its safety need met. It doesn't have esteem met either, but safety is more important. It's, further down on this. The idea is these are supporting layers, right? If you knock out safety, then the above layers crumble or something. Look at this like a pyramid. But you say, okay, pets don't have esteem met, but they also don't have safety met, and safety is more important, so that's what they're going to focus on. So that means in side pets' case, it meant that they would do things like cuddle plushies or pillows or things in the house, right? We had some interactions like that. Here it means that they hang out with friends, which often will help out esteem and belonging as well. But whatever, that's the point, right? Or if they're hungry is probably a better example for poppy seed pets, because that has very clear things like, yeah, maybe they're not feeling safe or loved or esteemed, but they need to get food, so they'll go out hunting and try to get some food. So Maslow's hierarchy is great because, again, it gives like that direction to what should the pets do. Whereas the triangular theory of love, well, it does a really good job of describing like, here is the current state of the relationship. It didn't give me any way to say, okay, but what does the pet want to do next, right? Like, what does it want to do about this relationship? Like, is it happy that it's low on passion or high on passion, or about a particular relationship? Like we're saying, if it's a familial thing, then it's probably totally satisfied that there isn't a passionate element to the relationship, right? But if it's a friend that they really like and they want to date that person, or there's an attraction there or something, well, then I don't know. I mean, then they would already have it. So you're not like taking actions to increase it, right? So it was a weird system in that way. Again, I like that it's able to describe a lot of things, but it didn't give a sense of what pets should do or would want in quotes, I guess, to do. I don't know, I say in quotes because it's a computer program, right? There isn't, the saying wants is a little interesting in this case. I mean, we're not at AI levels where I think we need to have ethical debates, about pets' wants. But anyway, so here's the hanging out code. But first, right, so what did I do instead, right? That's the question. So I looked at the system and this isn't good enough. I need some system that gives directions to what the pets want to do. And there was already this interesting thing that could happen with the triangular theory that I really liked. I didn't see this explicitly laid out in this guy's description, although I never read his book. Maybe in his book he goes into this. But something that naturally occurred that I thought was really interesting is that you could have two pets in some kind of relationship who had different feelings from one another, right? So one pet could be like, oh, I really like you and I'm really committed to this relationship, and I think you're like, I think in the game it says, is hot or whatever. But then maybe the other pet is like, well, I don't feel any of those things about you. Maybe it's like, yeah, I mean, you're cool to hang out with, but like, if we stopped hanging out, and I'm not interested in banging or whatever, right? So like you could have these uneven relationships, which is very interesting. That was the only thing with this system that led to interesting points where a pet would say, hey, I want to make babies, right? Because pet pregnancy is where this all came from inside pets. The whole thing was we want pets to get pregnant, and I was like, okay, this is a game about little creatures that kind of have their own, self-agency and everything else. They're not just going to have babies randomly. I need a reason for them to do so, right? So that's why I implemented the system in the first place. So anyway, so for that example, right, if you had uneven relationships, that was a thing where it was like, oh, here's a decision point that comes out. A pet says, hey, let's make babies, and the other pet says, I'm not really into that with you, right? And then that would lead to a little disagreement. And that was the only thing that ever came up, because that's what the system was created for. Again, it was created to facilitate breeding, if you want to call it that. It gets a little weird, right? Like, side pets has always had this problem, and poppy seed pets a little bit too, of like, they're like animals, but they're also like humans, and they're basically like kids, but they're also kind of like adults. I mean, they're making babies, right? So like, it's a weird space that these pets occupy. I think it's really good that they are like weird, non-real creatures, like what's a Desic? I don't know, it doesn't matter. It's a weird creature. Could it behave in this way? Sure, because it's a made-up creature, right? It works out perfectly. Initially, side pets actually started as I just wanted to model human behavior, so I was going to make them like they were human kids. But then I was like, well, I want you to like pet them, to make them feel better. I was like, well, I mean, that is what we do with humans. You do like, if you have a kid, you console them, and they're, I guess you could call that petting, right? But that's not really what we call it as people. We don't say that people are petting each other. I mean, Maybe there's heavy petting or something, but that's a different thing. Although, whatever. So anyway, yeah, the pets occupy a weird space. So it was kind of, again, to facilitate breeding in the game, which was a thing people wanted to do with their pets. They wanted to be able to, like, have 2 Desiques make more Desiques of different, whatever, or other pets that had 4 legs. There was an interesting system there for what kinds of pets could birth other kinds of pets. It was completely nonsense, fine for game purposes. But at the same time but what does the pet want, right? Is that okay? And so there was an interesting conflict there with the players that I don't know if that was ever resolved, and that problem honestly is carried straight over into Poppy Seed Pets. So if you played Sci Pets and you thought that system was awkward, it's kind of going to be awkward here too. But I don't know. We'll see how it works out. I'm kind of willing to go through the awkward periods to find a good solution. But anyway, so what was the new system? The new system I came up with based on that whole thing of pets having different opinions of each other, and having those kind of possible conflict points of, oh, that's what you want, but not what I want. Based on that, I said, okay, let's just make it very explicit. Because another problem with the old system was that when you looked at a relationship, it told you, oh, they're greatly valued in all these things, and you're kind of committed to, or whatever. So it would tell you vaguely how they felt on those 3 points, those 3 axes of the triangle, from the triangular theory of love. But that didn't really tell you, like, but what kind of relationship is it, right? Like, you could kind of infer that, I guess, but it was an inference. It wasn't like, oh, we're friends, we're BFFs. And in some ways, in real life, I feel like the labels that we have for relationships are restrictive in, I don't know, how we think about interacting with people. So for that reason, I didn't really want to adopt these, like, here's a label. But the labels as states are just super convenient for programming. I mean, this is why we come up with them in real life too, right? We try to categorize life and the shapes of galaxies and all these things, and they mostly work. What's a planet, right? Everyone wants to get excited about Pluto. Is it a planet or not? These are all weird categories that humans just kind of make up because it's useful to because then you can talk to people and say, oh, they're friends. Oh, that's a planet. Oh, that's a spiral galaxy. Whatever. Oh, it's a anteater. Like, whatever, right? And then you know what people are talking about. Relationships are interesting because, I don't know, galaxies don't have feelings, but people do. So it can be misleading in a way to describe people, people's relationships in vague ways that maybe don't matter so much for a galaxy. Or I don't know, maybe do galaxies have feelings? Wow, now we're getting weird. So anyway, but these labels are very useful for coding because what it means is the pets can have very explicit goals. Like, rather than saying, like, I want to feel committed to this person or something, which is kind of a weird thing, right? The pet can say, oh, I want to be BFFs, right? Like, that's the kind of relationship I want with this person. And yeah, currently we have agreed that we are just friends, but I would like to be BFFs, right? And maybe the other pet is like, oh, currently we're just friends, but I would like to be dating, right? And so now this gives pets a goal that they can work toward. It gives them, now there's a thing they want to do. They'll hang out and say, I think it's time I brought this up. Hey, we're just friends right now, but I'd really like to be best friends, whatever that... I mean, that distinction is kind of funny anyway, but for the purposes of the game, it just means they're going to hang out more. Then the other pet might say, yeah, that's a great idea, or that the other pet might say, actually, I was thinking that maybe we should date, right? So we have these, and then the other pet says, oh, I didn't think about dating, and then does it change its mind and say, yeah, we should date, or does it, like, stick to its guns and say, no, I only want to be friends? Are they able to resolve that in one way or the other, or do they just break up entirely because now there's this, weird situation? It's like, oh gosh, you wanted to date, and I don't want to date, and now you're afraid, but that's what you want, and so, right? It leads to that so much more easily than the triangular theory of love. I couldn't get any of that out of the triangular theory of love. It wasn't clear to me how I would move in that direction. Again, maybe I should have read that dude's books. I know that he's written other books. Maybe there was interesting stuff in there, but it just, again, it kind of came out naturally somehow from what I was working on with the triangular theory of love and the breeding system, if you want to call it that. This seemed like kind of the natural solution, just based on my experience there. And people seemed very excited about it. Like, talking to people on the Discord as I was developing it, I was starting to feel bad because it was taking me a long time to do all those kinds of conversations, those decision points, or whatever you want to call them, between the pets. And people in the Discord like, I can't wait for this update. I can't wait for this update. It's like, oh no, I'm letting people down. It's taking a long time. There's a lot of things to code. So let's get into what is behind that code and why this took a long time. So here's where things start. when two pets decide to hang out, and again, who they decide to hang out with partly depends on the nature of the relationship. So there's just like a higher chance that they'll hang out with a BFF rather than a regular friend. And I think regular friends and rivals are kind of equal, all these kinds of things. So depending on what the current relationship state is, it drops into one of these functions. Are we hanging out? And it's privately versus at like a park event. If they're hanging out in a public setting, then it's a totally different thing, right? So, okay, are we hanging out privately as BFFs? Are we hanging out privately as friends with benefits? Are we hanging out privately as mates? There's also friends somewhere in here. Right, all these states. And then when they do, there's different things that they can do. But one of the things that might happen if we follow the code around, I'll just skip to it because it's right here, is they can suggest a relationship change. And it's not really, I mean, I'm going to reveal this. I feel like in some ways this kind of ruins the magic of the game, but if you're watching this, then that's fine. The pets just have a timer. They're just saying, hey, look, after we hang out 14 times, I'm gonna suggest this goal, right? And it is a little weird too in a way that the pet is like, so I just met this pet and we're friends, but I want to date. Like I just know that instantly rather than having to get them know them. I mean, maybe for some people that happens, right? For other people not, but again, mostly you don't know what that goal is. I mean, there's a merit now that exposes it, so it's a little weird, but if you just had a pet and it just kind of naturally suggested changes in relationships, you know, you could imagine in your head that the pet was like deciding, oh, I think we should date now, right? When really they had decided in advance. So it's a little wacky in that way. But if you do, I mean, whatever. Now the merit's there, so it kind of exposes that part. But a thing that's still not exposed, and I probably wouldn't expose, is this basically a timer of like, we're going to hang out 10 times, and then I'm going to suggest a relationship change. And then they hang out, 9 times, 8 times, 7 times, 6 times, and then it gets to it, right? And each of them, each side of the relationship, they each have a timer. And it's possible the timer is different places. So one pet might kind of beat them to the punch, you know, and say, oh, I'm going to suggest a change first. Or maybe they're happy with the relationship, so they don't ever bring up because like, oh, I want to be friends and we are friends. Perfect. And that merit that's like pets, I call it introspective. I'm not totally satisfied with that name, but that makes them have kind of a quicker timer. Like, no, I know what I want. You know, I'm thinking about it. This is what I want, so I'm going to bring it up faster. Which I don't know, is that totally accurate for the word introspective? That's kind of why I don't like the word introspective, but for that merit. But whatever, it's working for now. And then this is the part that explodes into all the code I had to do, because it's like, okay, currently, you know, we're hanging out privately. One of the pets is going to suggest a relationship change. What's our current relationship? Oh, we're friends? Okay, so let's suggest a relationship change as friends. Well, what's my goal? Is my goal that I don't want to be friends anymore? My goal is to be in a disliked state, you know, with the other pet. I don't think anything in the code would actually make that happen right now, but it is. Actually, no, that's not true. It can happen. They could hang out initially, and there's like a low chance that they'll be like, my goal is to be, you know, I don't actually like this pet or whatever. So yeah, so that can happen with new pets that start hanging out. Pets from before the update, I made sure that all of the goals were, for the most part, like in line with what they kind of seemed like they were right now. I didn't want to ruin headcanon too much, basically. I was like, look, if the pets right now say that they're both, you know, they each think that the other is like hot and super valued and fun to be with and all these things, I didn't want to then release this update and then it's like, oh, but his goal now is that they don't want to, you know, dislike, I don't like this pet. So I wanted to, you know, people were talking about their relationships with each other, so on the Discord, so I didn't want to like totally screw one of those over. I mean, there can be some little bumps down, like they might say, oh, we're currently friends with benefits, but I just want to be BFFs. Like there are those kinds of changes. But anyway, but I avoided any instance, like no way after, for any pets with relationships before the update, none of them are going to say, oh, I want to be in the disliked status, for example, or like we're currently mates, but I just want to be friends. I don't think even happens. Anyway, so what's my goal? Let's say my goal, we're in here, oh, I'm a friend, but my goal is to be best friends. So let's hang out privately. Currently friends, I want to be best friends. And now you have to check, right? So already from like, what are the like 6 possible states we could be in, or 5 possible states? Okay, now there's 5 possible goals I have, and within there's 5, actually 6 possible goals that the other pet might have. And so you have to multiply all these together. So now it's like, okay, we're hanging out privately, we're currently friends, I'm going to suggest that we be best friends, but what does the other pet want? And you know, all 3 of those are important considerations. If you're currently friends and one of you wants to be best friends and the other wants to date, then that's different from if you're currently dating and one of you wants to be best friends and the other one wants to just be a friend or something, right? Or doesn't like you at all. And a lot of these are very similar. Some of these things I could wrap up. Like I mathed it out. It's like 216 or something different combinations, I think. It was something like that. right, of things I would have to code up. A lot of them I was able to kind of wrap up into a single or a couple different functions. They're like, hey, I have suggested a relationship upgrade, let's call it. It's kind of a weird way to phrase it. Some relationships, it's hard to say one is better than the other, right? But it's, I guess, like more intense. There's more investment there, right? Like, we're going to casually hang out friends. Like, no, we're best friends. We're going to hang out all the time, right? So, and that's what this is. We're going from friends to BFFs. So that's an upgrade, but there's a chance for drama because the other pet wants something differently. And so what are the chances that pet 1 agrees to pet 2's wants? What are the chances that pet 2 agrees to pet 1's wants? And we can kind of express a lot of the relationship changes in that way. And then there's another one that's like, I'm suggesting a relationship downgrade. Currently we're best friends, but I only want to be friends. I don't want to hang out as much. And really the main reason why there are two different functions for that is it just changes the language, like the text. The actual text that you see as a player is a little bit different. I want it customized to kind of reflect, like, is this a sad thing, for the other pet? Or like, if like if I come to you and say, hey, we're best friends, but I don't want to hang out with you that much anymore, that's a totally different sort of feeling than me saying, oh, we're best friends and I want to date, right? So the text needs to reflect, whether we're doing a more involved, intense, committed relationship or lesser one. And then some things are always the same. And part of the problem was, I started coding all this before realizing, as I was starting, I was like, man, there's 216 of these, and I hadn't seen any patterns yet. So I was just starting to code them one by one, and then starting to get a feel for like, oh, this, is very similar to that other one, is very similar to that other one, is very similar to that. I can wrap all those up into one, function that just handles all of them, right? And I know that I could simplify this code down more. One easy example is like this one. Anytime that one pet suggests any kind of move of relationship, and the other pet is like, no, I don't like you at all. Like, it doesn't matter. We could say I'm going from friends to BFFs, friends to dating to friends with benefits, like whatever. If the other pet is actually like, yeah, but I don't even like you, then the result is always the same. Like, this conversation has come up, and the pet's just going to say, yeah, but I don't even want to talk about this. I don't even want to hang out at all, right? What a horrible and sad situation. But all of those interactions are going to basically be the same with some small variation. I went ahead when I was coding this up initially and like kind of copy and pasted it into the first ones. And this was one of the ones that made me start to realize, oh, I could actually abstract this away to put it in kind of programming terms, into a single function that handles these things. But I just left them alone. And part of the reason I left them alone is that I hand tweaked some of those descriptions. And it is interesting. If you play long enough and watch enough pet relationships, you'll start to notice it's like, oh, this particular change has a very different description than these other ones, because some of them I've hand-coded and some of them are handled by, the same function that handles like 50 others or something like that, I don't think any of them, I mean, maybe. It might be 50. So some of them are hand-coded, and I like that. I think the hand-coded is better. And it's an interesting thing, because there's a part of me that's like, I want to hand code all of them so that they all have a totally, any kind of subtleties, I don't know, to that change that makes sense to me, any kind of different text, I could just totally code and not have to worry about ruining other things. I'm currently recording. Can you hear? I didn't know if you could hear me.
No, yeah, I was like, I wonder what's going on. Does he have someone over?
No, I'm recording a video. All this will go in.
Cool. Are you coding right now?
Yeah, I'm going over the pet relationship change.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of my roommates. That is the roommate who drew pets. You drew the owl-looking thing.
I did.
Yep.
And the spirit animal.
Yes, and the little spirit. Yeah.
That's
Right.
cool.
So that's Hayri. Anyway, so where was I? I hope you could hear that over the. There's a bit of a distance from where I'm sitting to the door of my room. But anyway, yeah. So these changes this code handles all those kinds of relationship changes. And some of these other changes, like this dislike code, I didn't make a single function. I could, but again, I would like to be able to do some kind of, there's other ways I could do it. I don't have to hand code it and break them all out. There's ways I can pass in like callback functions to start to get technical. There's like different techniques I could use to allow, customization of certain events when needed, but otherwise just kind of fall back on the I don't know, like Mad Lib style, like, I wanted to be friendly rivals, but the other pet broke up entirely, right? Like, these are just kinds of, what is the state, and we just kind of plug it in. It's a Mad Lib, right? Whatever. Mad Libs are how the internet works, basically. It's like, we've got some strings of text, and we're going to inject a different string of text, and here we go. And this is what handles like, okay, did pet one, sorry, I want to say player one because I see P1, but did pet one change their mind, or did pet two change their mind, or were they neither was willing to budge on the position, and so they broke up. And I don't know, maybe there should actually be a change. There's just like, or a chance that they say, let's just figure this out later. Let's delay. I wish we didn't have this conversation. Something like that could be an interesting thing to put in there too. So. And that's kind of it. I mean, then there's a little bit of some math. So whenever there's a relationship change, I just wanted to know universally. This is the sort of thing where it would be interesting to add a little more subtlety. But, if you drop from mates to disliked, that would represent a change from 10 to 0. I just kind of made these numbers up. They generally felt right. And that turns into how much safety and love and things are going to lose because we've gone down 10. Whereas if you went from friends, which is 3, to mates 10, then it's like, whoa, that's amazing. We're friends and now we're mate and now we're dating. Plus 7 to all the things. So it just kind of uses this as a difference to figure out how the pets should feel about the relationship change. And again, it might be interesting to put in some like specifics for, I don't know, it seems like, going from 3 to 6 here and saying 2 to 3 here or something, I don't know, I don't feel like it necessarily captures everything. I'm sure I could find something else like, oh, we're dating, we should, I don't know, is there some other like, should we be storing like here's the date, like for anniversaries, like do we want anything like that in the game? Like there's all kinds of other things I could imagine having as effects rather than just a numerical change to how we currently feel. And something I don't like about the current system is that, like say you went from we're dating to we're just friends now, -7 to safety. In like 7 hours about, or, less if you go and pet your pet, like, yeah, you can come and pet your pet twice and it's like, I'm over the breakup, right? Which is kind of silly. So I would, and actually if they went to like broken up, then it would be 10 to -2. So you'd be at, 12, -12 down. But still, you pet the pet a couple of times and now it feels totally fine about having broken up. How long were they in that state, right? That's another thing we could imagine mattering. So, how long had they been dating? How long had they been friends? How long have they been kind of on an upward trend of the relationship? Had there been lots of like ups and downs in the past, right? Like all these things. Like, do we need all those details? I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Maybe some of them would be cool for gameplay. But if we did, the point is just some numbers, a list of numbers isn't going to get us there. So those are things that would need to change. And then, yeah, here's just like all these other things. Hang out privately. We're currently friends. I'm suggesting friendly rivals. What do you want? Oh, you want to be friends with benefits? Oh my gosh, there's going to be some drama. And here's like, right, 10% chance that either one of them, I want to be friends with benefits. And you're saying we're going to be friendly rivals? That's bullshit. 10% chance that I'm going to agree to that. And the other pet is like, I want to downgrade from friends. And actually, friends and friendly rivals, I shouldn't say downgrade. That is pretty... I consider them pretty similar. I don't know. I mean, friendly rivals is funny, right? That doesn't happen in real life, I don't think, so much. I mean, to a degree. But I'm really thinking of this as like anime level, like, I don't know. Yeah, I think I was going to say, I'll just stick with anime as the example. Yeah, an anime level rivalries, whatever, growing up stories, any of those kinds of, sports rival kind of things, whatever, all that stuff. Anyway, I think that's basically it. Currently BFFs, I want to be friends. Here's the call that function, right? It's just that over and over and over and over and over again. And you can see if you're looking at the line numbers over here, whoops, we're at line number like 1500, 1600, 1700, 1800, right? And it's just all these different cases because it's here are the possible states we're in now, here's where I want to go, where do you want to go, all those. And some of that I can imagine coming up with a very clever system to compose all that into a much smaller amount of code. I'm gonna, that's something I would just have to sit down and think about, A, how to do that, B, do I want to? Am I gonna give up the flexibility of saying like, here's a particular, relationship change, or I want something different to happen? If I condense things too much, like if I could somehow find a way, and I think there is a way, to express all this in just like 10 lines of code or something, how do you fill in, it's like, oh, but for this one particular case, I want a different sort of interaction, especially when we get into something else that's not currently reflected in the system is whether or not pets are poly or monogamous. I was looking online at stats, right? But it's a very small fraction of people who are poly, which is fine. I still want to reflect it, is what I'm saying. I still want to be, partly because I identified that way for a very long time. I was like, yeah, I think I'm probably poly. Now I'm like, I don't know. So I want it in the game, right? Same thing for like, one thing we've dodged entirely in a way is what is the sexual orientation of pets? Are they gay, bi, straight? I've basically always identified as straight, and so having that I just know so many people are. It's like, yeah, I have to have that in the game. It would be ridiculous to not reflect, to have that reflected in the game. Those preferences, but now, and they were in Side Pets, but now here we've said just none of them have any sexes, genders, or preferences along those lines. They all can just become pregnant, I guess. And something I'm going to do, I don't know, I've talked about this in some places, but when pets are making babies, I'm going to make both of them get pregnant. And I mean, part of the reason and that's what I wanted to have that be in effect, because something that happened on Side Pets that was kind of weird is you would have two pets who know each other that belong to totally different users, right? And then the pets hang out, and whoever had the girl pet got the baby, which is kind of interesting. I mean, that does reflect real life, but from a gameplay perspective, it's like, but we both want new pets, right? I mean, that makes it so that girls are more valued in the game, which I don't know, that in and of itself, I guess, isn't necessarily bad, but it's like, it just creates a weird, if every player was like, oh, you should only have females, well then how are any of the players gonna get pets that get pregnant, right? So it's like, whatever. We can get rid of all that and just say all pets get pregnant, it's all the same. Poly versus monogamous, not so much. We could just ignore it. We could ignore that aspect of life, but I don't know, I think it's an important part of relationships, again, because I have been in those relationships in the past. No doubt plays a part. I'm biased. So I'd like to have that in the game. And currently all the pets, actually, so the default is, because they don't care about that, is your pet can be like dating 10 pets and friends with benefits with 10 others and whatever, and like it doesn't even matter to them. So now that is true, like I mentioned before, when I was doing this relationship update, I didn't want to kind of like betray the headcanon, I guess, of existing relationships. I was saying if two pets are like clearly from their description dating, I didn't want there to be a possibility that then they just like break up as soon as I release the update. Now I'm like, oh no, because I didn't implement poly versus monogamous from the very beginning and maybe just picked one of the pets and said, okay, these are the ones that are dating, right? I think people have been pretty okay with that. But now that's like, oh, all these pets are explicitly dating. Like, do I just make all the pets who are dating many people just be poly? And then so we'll just like start the game with like 95% of pets are poly, but from now on it's like 1% or whatever it was. I'll have to find that stat again. So that's like an interesting thing now and I still want to code it up. I don't know. I mean, in some ways you see people are already saying like, why is my pet dating like 10 pets? Right? It's like, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, and maybe going back to that whole thing I was talking about before of like, well, what's a Desic? What's a little triangle rock? I don't know, maybe all these, there are species in the world, animal species that are just, they're not committed to any particular relationship at all. It's not even poly. It's like they don't even care, right? So whatever. So these animals could lie in some weird space where for whatever reason they're all poly, I guess. I don't know, but I don't know. I would like to. I think it's interesting to have the different mechanics, and I favor anything too, any kind of mechanic that can give an interesting uniqueness to, like, oh, this pet, like favorite flavors, right? Like, we didn't have to reflect favorite flavors in the game, but I don't know, it's like, oh, this pet really likes blackberries. That's like a unique quality of that pet. And now they have all these merits that you can get. Oh, of course, I don't have the merits listed because my pets aren't ready to get those. But having built-in merits too, like they do in I think Pokemon, right? Where it's like, this pet is, I don't remember what they're off the top of my head because I'm not that deep of a Pokemon player, but there was like, I don't know, stubborn or something. Or I don't know, they had all these like little qualities that were basically just stat changes. But it was cool that you could have two Pikachus, but they were different Pikachus. They had different properties about them, and you could see that reflected in gameplay. You're like, oh, this Pikachu, like, I don't know, he hits a little harder, but is weaker to something. I don't know. I can't remember what all the stat tweaks were, right? And just a stat tweak I don't think is the most interesting. Favorite flavors is more interesting, right? It's very clear. It's like, oh, he really likes blackberries. You're like, oh, he really likes blackberries? He really likes blackberries? That's great, right? It's a very clear and different thing. Same thing with poly and monogamous is where I was going with that, is that it would be a very obvious thing, like, oh, this pet dates lots of pets. That's a unique quality about that pet, right? I didn't know that was the case. until you discover it through gameplay, that there is this, like, now it interacts with the game world in a different way. I think that's great. So, I mean, again, there are biases for me why I'm interested in putting it in the game. Yeah, I mean, again, anything though, if you throw anything at me, you're like, oh, this would make, like the merits, if there was built-in merits that pets could have, 100%, I might do that. It's something that's been kind of in the back of my mind. It's why I made the merit system to begin with, to give interesting different ways that the pets can be. So yeah, all that kind of stuff is great. I think letting the pets have different stories is, I mean, that's part of the game. I mean, that's what all these games are about. That's what, like, The Sims is about too, right? You're like, oh, this sim is like extra tidy or whatever, so he's always cleaning. You're like, oh yeah, look, he always cleans up the dishes immediately or whatever, None of the other ones are doing that, right? Like, it's interesting to see those different behaviors. So I'm, looking to do the same thing in SciPets. And when it comes to relationships, oh my gosh, so much opportunity, right, to do that. How could I possibly resist? So anyway, I think that's about it. That's how the code works. I hope that knowing how the sausage is made, I guess, as they say, doesn't ruin the magic. I don't think it should. I don't know. It depends on the kind of person you are. I always love learning about this stuff. It's like, yes, please tell me how the universe works and is created. That destroys none of the magic for me. That makes it incredible. Although, wow, I don't mean to say that you looked at my code and went, that's incredible, Ben. This game is not as incredible as the universe. But hopefully it's interesting to learn how these things work anyway. If there's any other things that you're interested in just kind of hearing me ramble about as to how the game works, or other things you want to see me code, I mean, I'm just going to post the coding things anyway, so never mind, you don't have to tell me that. But yeah, certainly if you want me to explain how things are implemented, I don't know if I could go into this much depth about favorite flavors, but I'm sure there's things to say there. Any of this stuff. I don't know. Paper bags, what are they about? I don't know. I don't know what the questions are. That's why I'm asking you. So tell me if you got any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Happy to ramble for, how long has this been? Oh my goodness, 36 minutes. I hope this has been interesting. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're having a great time with Poppy Seed Pets. I love coding this stuff. This is probably clear. Hopefully you're also enjoying playing it. Otherwise, it's very unfortunate that I spend all the time to code these things. Well, I enjoyed it too, so it's okay. Anyway, thanks again and goodbye.